But I don't think the founding fathers envisioned snatch them off the street, no hearing. You don't tell them what they're charged with. Due process has been around for thousands of years. This is basic stuff. You don't even have to go to law school to know this. You know, Hitler did that. They just snatched you Jewish. Even Jesus Christ, they gave him due process. They hauled him in. He had 2 trials. You know, there's been a lot of controversy about rounding up the Venezuelan gang members and sending them to a prison in El Salvador. I mean, just snatch them off the street, no hearing, and you're in El Salvador. And the worst example was when a judge was having a hearing and ordered them, don't do anything with these people until, I decide, number 1, whether I have jurisdiction, number 2, whether they're gang members, number 3, whether they're entitled to due process. And they ignored the order and just kept flying the guys with about 200 of them down to El Salvador, which is a small country in Central America with a right-wing president. Now that country doesn't have a history of being stable, so they've had a number of coups down there. But anyway, this guy's taking the prisoners in so he can get the money, because America spends about $39,000 per year per inmate or detainee. That's what they spend. So a little broke country down in Central America will take all of your prisoners if they can get 39,000 US dollars per prison. The problem with all of it is this. Since the country was founded, and it was founded with something that they call due process, because the people who came over here came out of monarchies in Europe where there was no due process. The king didn't like you. If he wanted to screw you, he would screw you. There ain't no hearing. There ain't no charges. You just get thrown in jail, and maybe somebody will remember you 10 years from now. Well, the founding fathers said, no, no, no. Under no circumstances will that happen in America. No matter who you are, you will always get, this is fundamental, this is basic stuff. You don't even have to go to law school to know this. You will always get notice. Somebody must tell you what you did wrong. And then the second component of due process is an opportunity to be heard in front of an impartial judge, referee, administrative law judge. Those are the 2 core elements of due process. They've never varied. For over 250 years, that's just been what everybody's entitled to. So you can't just snatch somebody off the street. You don't tell them what they're charged with, and you don't give them an opportunity to dispute that. Well, that's where we are in the Trump era. We're back to what they were doing in the monarchies in Europe that caused those Europeans to flee Europe and come to America. They'd rather start over in America. So I think that, we're going backwards, and I hope the judge does not allow the new era of no due process. Well, I never thought any U.S. president would sit there and argue for no due process. Now they're just snatching people off the streets. Hitler did that. They just snatched you Jewish. Hitler did that. So that's a bad scene. And one guy wasn't even a gang member. They just snatched him and he's gone. And then they come and tell the judge, well, there's nothing we can do. They're now in the custody of El Salvador. I wish I was a judge, because I would introduce them to what you can do when you break the law. Those judges have lifetime appointments. I would introduce you to first due process, because I would assume you went to law school. You can't be in my court if you didn't go to law school, arguing anybody's position, the government or the defendant. Then I would make you acknowledge that the fundamental, the elements of due process are that notice of charges and an opportunity to be heard by an impartial decision maker, not one of your little buddies, in the agency. And once you acknowledge that, then I would make you go down the list of the names and tell me when they got the notice and when they had their opportunity to be heard. And once you say they didn't get that, then you will bring them back by a certain date and a certain time, or you will go to jail for contempt. And you'll sit there until they get back. And then you would go to jail, and every person who signed off on that would be held in contempt. And I would put all of you in the same cell so you could have company. But I don't know if these judges today, have that kind of backbone. But we cannot get away from due process. I don't think any American wants to get away from due process because you never know when you're going to be charged with stuff. And the interesting thing, I listen to all these silent Christians, right? The so-called evangelicals and Christians, all these folks that call themselves Christians. They have due process in the church. If they're going to accuse you of something in the church, they tell you what it is, and they give you an opportunity to be heard, even in the church. Even Jesus Christ, they gave him due process. They hauled him in. He had 2 trials, one with the Jews and one with King Herod. They gave him due process. Hey, man, they said you walking around talking about you king of the Jews. This is what they're charging you with. You can't go around claiming you king. I'm the king. I'm King Herod. What do you have to say, Jesus? So due process has been around for thousands of years in most places in some forms. And then they wiped it out with the rise of the monarchy in Europe. And we said we'll never have that again. But I don't think the founding fathers envisioned a Donald Trump as president.